Hello all. Welcome to our fluid mechanics course ME21101. We are at lecture number 2 and covering introduction. In today's class, we will see a few basic science experiments which will demonstrate fluid mechanics. And end of the class, we learn about microscopic, macroscopic scales and what it means continuum hypothesis. In the last class, we have seen liquids and gases can be brought under one single framework named fluid mechanics under certain conditions. And in today's class, we learn the basic experiments, science experiments, which will inspire us to look fluid mechanics in a different perspective. So here we have a teapot or teacup. You have tea leaves inside that and you are stirring this teacup. Initially these tea leaves went all the way outside radially, but when you pull out this spoon, these tea leaves came at the center. We expect that because of centrifugal forces these tea leaves might be radially spread out, but interestingly they came to the center. And the way how it works is secondary vortices will be created in those teacups. So these words like vortices, secondary, primary, these kind of things, we will learn at other lectures. Now let us look at why a shampoo behaves in a crazy way. You have a bottle of shampoo, you are pouring that and start seeing suddenly eruption of the shampoo happens. So a frequent burst of the shampoo comes out of that. And if you are closely looking at nearby the zone, it forms columnar structure. Because shampoo is more like a non-Newtonian fluid, which also we will learn in later classes. It behaves in a crazy way and you will have sudden eruptions. So let us look.
Take a ping pong ball and a source of streaming air like this vacuum blower or a hairdryer. Turn it on and place the ball in the air. It floats.
How does it work?
When the air reaches the ball, it pushes upward, balancing the downward force of gravity. The ball is balanced up and down, but why doesn't it move side to side? In fact, we can tilt the stream and the ball doesn't fall. Let's look again at the airflow. Air is deflected around the ball because, simply, the ball is in the way. Inertia tells us the air should keep going in a straight line, but the fast-moving air passes by air particles next to the ball, and viscosity or fluid friction causes the airflow to pull the stationary air along with it. That leaves a low-pressure area, which will pull the moving flow back toward the ball. This tendency for air to follow a curved surface is called the Coanda effect. The ball is also pulled toward the area of low pressure. We can see this if we blow on one side of a ball. It moves toward the side we blew on. Now, if the ball moves to one side of the airstream, the effect is increased on the opposite side, and the ball is sucked back into the middle.
So this Coanda effect.
Hey there! I made this video as part of a competition to describe a phenomenon in 60 seconds. If it seemed rushed, that's why. It was. If you have more questions about the Coanda effect, send me a message. Now, go try this at home.
Not only that, from your teapot, if you are trying to pour tea into a cup, the hot tea crawls along the teapot instead of straight away going into the cup at low inclination angles or low speeds. That also usually explained by teapot effect. Or perhaps you have a cup of tea, you want to spill it onto table. But when you are trying to do that, this entire liquid won't straight away come like a stream, but it goes or crawls along the teacup. Why? Now let us look at next video.
We were at this event the other day, and I saw a guy kick a ball. I was distraught over the curved trajectory of the ball. How do they do that?
And since you can't get good at soccer using physics, I'd better consult a friend. Kyle! Kyle, I want to be able to bend it.
Okay. Okay, so look, I bet you that I can take this ball, set it in that corner, and bend it into that goal.
So I'm skeptical about this because you can't even see the opening of the goal. All you can see is the goalpost. And from the vector that you trace from the corner to... It's magic! No, it's physics. Do it again.
Ah.
How did you do that?
Well, it's a pretty standard technique in soccer to use the inside of your foot to generate spin on the ball. That spin is actually going to make the ball curve into the goal.
Let's take a look at how that happens.
As Kyle kicks the ball with his right foot on the right side, he imparts a spin on the ball. The ball traveling in this direction means air is flowing across it in the opposite direction. But right near the ball, there is a thin layer of air dragged around. As oncoming streams of air pass the ball, the side moving in the same direction as the spinning ball is accelerated, follows the curve of the ball, and is deflected off to the right. The side that is moving against the spinning ball meets opposing air and can't continue around the ball. It slows down and goes straight. We end up getting a net flow of air to the right, and the ball must move left.
Wait, that's Newton's third law.
Yes, thank you, Kyle.
Just like a rocket, if you push a gas one direction, namely downwards out of the rocket, then the rocket has to go up.
So what you're saying is my shot is like a rocket.
Yes. Thank you, Kyle. Like the rocket, as the air moves in one direction,
The ball has to go the other direction. Also, since the air is slowing down on the right side, you get a buildup of air, which creates a higher pressure on that side and pushes the ball to the left. The airflow is extremely important. You could not make this kick in a vacuum. It's not some weird thing the ball does to itself to curve. You need air flowing across the ball to push the ball. This is called the Magnus effect.
So you can use this phenomenon to do all sorts of shots in soccer. As we already saw, I can use the inside of my foot to make the ball curve left. I can also use the outside of my foot to make the ball spin the other way, and then it curves right. If I wanted to, I could even hit the bottom of the ball, give it backspin, and send it up into the air.
with a backspin, it's actually gonna curve upwards.
Finally, if I want to get real tricky with it, I could put no spin on it at all, like a knuckleball. When this happens, you get turbulence, unpredictable on both sides of the ball, and the keeper doesn't know where it's going.
Should we try the knuckleball?
That one's gonna be a little tougher.
That's the physics of soccer. Thank you for your help, Kyle. If you want to see some videos of some incredible soccer players bending the ball, check out these links.
So let us move on to something named
This episode is sponsored by Audible.
Welcome to the science. Have you seen this experiment before? With the milk and the food coloring?
And then you put some dish soap on the end of a Q-tip and you dip it in the middle of the liquid to get this awesome experiment. This is the kind of experiment that never gets old. But if you're like me and you fidget a lot and you keep playing with it, you'll notice that if you flick the Q-tip across the surface of the water, you get these little beads that roll across. They're like little bowling balls that roll across. Oh my God, that's so pretty. I have to take a picture. Thanks to some phantom high-speed footage from Beyond Slow Motion, awesome channel, definitely check it out, link is in the description. You can see that these beads form as streams of milk break up into individual droplets and then bounce on the surface. It's so mesmerizing. But what are they? I drove myself crazy, Googling every different combination of soap and milk and food coloring and liquid, and I could not figure out what they are. So I did what I always do when I need to know something. And I asked my physics friend, Dan Walsh, who immediately said,
Anti-bubbles.
I thought he was joking.
You think I'm joking?
Turns out, he was close. Anti-bubbles are even cooler than this. Dan, are you ready for this?
I was born ready.
Oh yeah! That's amazing! I am here with Ashley, who's my intern, and Dan, who's my friend and is just really enthusiastic about physics. Also a PhD student in physics.
That's another reason why I'm so interested.
Yeah. Also a student of physics. So much physics here. So anti-bubble is the exotic sounding name given to these little spheres that we've made underwater because they're kind of like the opposite of a regular bubble. A regular bubble is a thin film of a liquid enclosing a gas and then typically floating in a gas like air, whereas an anti-bubble is a thin film of gas enclosing a sphere of liquid and then typically fully submerged in a liquid. Do you want to try this one? Oh yeah.
Just try a bunch of different parameters.
So you've got to put water in both of these containers, then add soap, mix it all in, and then you squeeze water from this container onto the surface of this one.
Oh, that was a good one. Oh, you're getting some good ones. Those are awesome.
The water drags some air along with it, which closes off into a shell.
It takes some time to get used to.
It is like a sweet spot
you
angle.
have to find a sweet spot.
But it's easy to see the structure of the anti-bubbles when we added food coloring into the squeeze bottle, because then when they pop, you can see that colored liquid come out, typically making the shape of a vortex ring.
Oh, that's so hard.
Oh! Did you see how there was a little regular bubble that came up?
By using high-speed cameras, physicists have observed that the air at the bottom of the anti-bubble floats to the top, popping the air film. You've now got a little air droplet that floats to the surface, which is just the opposite of a popped bubble, where the liquid film falls because of gravity.
Thank you guys.
Sure. Thank
High five.
you.
So despite sounding like some exotic form of matter, anti-bubbles are actually just as common as regular bubbles. You make them when you wash your hands with soapy water, but they pop much more easily than regular bubbles.
Why?
Wait, so why do regular bubbles pop? So you form a regular bubble by decreasing the surface tension of water. And when you decrease the surface tension, bubbles can live a lot longer. There's actually a really interesting molecular reason why bubbles keep their nice spherical shape. It works like this. Each soap molecule has a hydrophilic, that is a water-attracting head, and a hydrophobic, or a water-repelling tail. When you make a soap bubble, the soap molecules line up so that hydrophobic heads are in contact with the water. They have a slight electric charge, which means that the soap molecules on one surface of the film repel the soap molecules on the other surface, which helps keep the film from collapsing in on itself. That is, until the film evaporates. Now, an anti-bubble, on the other hand, is also made of soapy water, but there are a few key differences. Everything's all flipped around. So the anti-bubble air film, the hydrophobic tails are now facing each other in the film, and the hydrophilic heads are facing away in the liquid. Soapy water is actually a good electrical conductor, which means that electric charges can flow easily through it. So those slightly charged hydrophilic heads attract oppositely charged molecules in the water, basically neutralizing the charge at the surface of the anti-bubble air film. Those electric repulsive forces that basically help the bubble keep its shape don't exist in anti-bubbles, and so they pop much more easily than their regular bubble cousins. No! So as you can see, they're kind of hard to make. Like, we struggled with a lot of the steps. Don't put too much food coloring.
Yeah.
I would suggest practicing without food coloring first, because otherwise you're going to make all the fluid red.
Yeah. The other trick is that if you add some corn syrup into this bottle, you'll increase the density of this liquid because corn syrup is more dense than water, so that you can get your anti-bubbles to sink. Or even get a little bit of the corn syrup in here mixed in the bottom so that you've got a gradient of density from more dense to less dense. Then when you squeeze this liquid into the cup, you could get them to float right in the middle, kind of like a neutral buoyancy in that level of the liquid density. It takes a lot of patience. They're so cool! Ah, I love science. So if you were to make an anti-bubble in space where there's no buoyant forces caused by gravity, you could make the anti-bubble last a lot longer. Destin over at Smarter Every Day is making a video with more about this, so as soon as that's up, I'll put the link in the description. Even after all this explanation,
What are vortices?
check this out. I'm just gonna drag this plate through the water in the pool. That's it. But look what forms.
Perfect black circles on the bottom of the pool. And it's so weird, they don't die. They just keep going right next to each other. I sped this footage up because the circles took 3 minutes to cross the pool and didn't seem to be dying out. These got sharper as they went and made it all the way across.
So cool. And look closer, you can see what's causing them. There are two almost unnoticeable dips in the surface of the water. Why don't they die out? And how do these dark spots form? And why do the dips move together? So many questions. Let's first look at what they are. When I dragged the plate through the water, you could see it forming little vortices like you get when you move a paddle through the water. A vortex is a gas or liquid moving in circles with what we call a vortex line going up through the circles. They are everywhere. Tornadoes, water flowing down the drain, hurricanes, or the movement of air over an airplane wing. Vortices often form when there's a difference in fluid speed, like fast wind moving over slow wind. As you move the plate forward, the water right next to the boundary moves with the plate because of friction. The water further out is not moving. It's that difference in velocity that causes a shear force and starts the water spinning. This is accentuated by the water in front of the plate being forced around the sides and the water behind the plate being sucked forward as the plate moves along. In this coherent vortex, our dips can travel much further across the pool than a ripple without dissipating. Why? The vortex wants to keep its angular momentum, so it continues spinning as it moves through the water and only loses some energy through friction to the surrounding stationary water. So what we appear to have here is two vortices moving across the pool, but it seems weird that they stay right together. Well, when we create this vortex, we're forcing water to move around the whole plate, not just on the surface of the water. Our vortex line is curved. We're creating a half vortex ring. You know, like a smoke ring, bubble ring, or even the plume rising up from an explosion, but half of that. These two dips on the water's surface are just the ends of the half ring. They're connected, and that's why they stay together. We can see this if we put a little food coloring into the ends. The food coloring travels from one end to the other and you can see the entire half ring. So cool! We just made a bubble ring without the bubble. This also tells you something interesting. The half ring is not a wave. A wave is a disturbance moving through a medium that transfers energy but doesn't transfer matter. When we added food coloring, we saw clearly that the vortex is transferring matter just like a smoke ring does. So sadly, it's not a wave. It's cooler than a wave. Now back to this half ring vortex. Isn't it weird? You've probably never seen half of a smoke ring before. Why? Well, according to Helmholtz law, a vortex line cannot start or end in a fluid, so a vortex line either wants to close into a loop or end at a boundary. If you tried to cut a smoke ring in half, it would either break up or, even cooler, it would break up into two smaller smoke rings.
I don't know if that happens. It would be awesome.
Since the line can't end in the fluid, it ends at the surface. You almost never see these half vortices though because they have to occur on the boundary of two media. If you can think of another way to make the entire half ring visible, like a smoke ring or a bubble ring, let me know. So now, why does our vortex create those cool dark spots?
Well, the balance between gravity, centripetal forces, and surface tension creates a funnel shape which acts like a lens.
Lenses often work by focusing light to a point, like this Fresnel lens, which can melt pennies in the sun, but I digress. Our vortex lenses focus the sunlight away from the center, like so, and you have a bright ring surrounding a dark circle. The ring highlights the dark circle further, and you get these incredibly clear black spots. So cool! Now, I highly recommend trying this at home, especially if it's too cold to swim in the pool. Here are some tips. The water has to be very still. Even a small breeze makes it harder to create these. The sun has to be out, or it won't work. And you can try some other really cool things. Send your vortices at a wall. You'll see the dark spots spread out. Or try colliding two of them. Happy physicsing!
Let us look at another which is called
The breakfast table is probably the last place you'd expect to find cool physics, but there is some awesome science happening right here, and you've probably seen it lots of times without even realizing it. Ever notice how cereal tends to stick together in the middle of the bowl, or it clumps to the edges? That makes it easy to eat. But why does it happen? We see the same clumpage with other objects too. Paper clips, thumbtacks, even bubbles in a beverage will snap together. Maybe you've noticed this, but scientists didn't fully understand what was going on until 2005, when a pair of mathematicians decided to hit the lab, hit the kitchen, and hit the books. And what they found is cool. I'm super cereal. Check this out. Breakfast cereal is less dense than water, and milk is mostly water. It's buoyant. It weighs less than the milk it displaces. And that force of buoyancy pushes up on each ring until it matches the downward force of gravity. This interaction holds the Cheerios at the surface of the liquid, like little toasty rafts drifting together on top of a sea of cereal milk. It's a really complicated way of saying cereal floats. But look closely at where the cereal meets the liquid. It's curved up. The same thing happens at the edge of the container, thanks to the meniscus effect. Water molecules are sticky. They're attracted to each other, but they're even more attracted to the edges of your bowl or glass or to the edge of the cereal itself. That adhesion forms a U shape wherever the liquid meets an edge. A buoyant object will always be pushed up the liquid to the highest point on a meniscus. That's what makes them stick to the edge and what causes the Cheerios to become Cheery Amigos. Any two nearby O's are pushed to a high point between them, and clumps are pushed toward the overall highest point in the bowl around the edge. Let's try something denser. I don't recommend eating paper clips, but toss them in water and they sink. Place them carefully though, and you can get them to float. They're too dense to be buoyant. They float because of surface tension. Water molecules like to stick to each other so much they can behave like a membrane that's strong enough to hold up tiny things. Now let's try it with these thumbtacks. Like the paper clips, you can see that they're pushing the membrane down, just not hard enough to break through. If I place another one nearby, watch what happens. They're attracted to each other, just like the Cheerios, but the water around each one is curving down. Instead of climbing up the water like the cereal did, they fall into each other's sinkhole. We can mess this whole scenario up just by adding soap. The chemical properties of soap lower the surface tension of water, so anything relying on surface tension to stay afloat will sink. But buoyant objects don't rely on surface tension, so they continue surfing the meniscus. Now, the first time I did this, I wondered if the tacks were being pulled together by static attraction on the plastic coating or something. So I put in just the plastic bit to see. But instead of being pulled towards the tack, something strange happens. They repel each other. The same thing happens with Cheerios and a paperclip. That's because light floaty objects run away from the low points caused by the heavy objects. A buoyant object will always repel something held up by surface tension's stretchy membrane. Just to be clear, you should never put thumbtacks in your cereal, but this is what would happen if you did. All of this made me wonder, what could happen if we could reverse the direction of water's meniscus? I coated this glass with a hydrophobic coating that does just that. When I put thumbtacks on top of the water in here, they floated to the edge instead of the center. And that buoyant object did the opposite. It floated to the middle. So that's cool and all, but does the physics of cereal clumping actually matter in the real world? It does if you're a tiny insect. Take water striders. These pond skaters are nature's Cheerios. They float so well that even a load 15 times their body weight won't make them sink. They can even jump on water. Tiny hairs on their legs trap air bubbles and increase their buoyancy. They're basically wearing swim floaties on their feet. Other aquatic insects like water treaders exploit surface tension, just like thumbtacks and paper clips. But they get in trouble when it's time to get out. Gravity is pushing them into the depressions under their feet, but they've come up with a clever way to climb the meniscus. A running start doesn't work, but by arching their bodies and lifting their front and back ends, the bugs curve the water up and they're pulled to the edge just like the Cheerios were. They're carried uphill by a physics-powered water escalator. That's pretty cool. If you can find science like this at breakfast, imagine what else you might see the rest of the day. Try this for yourself and see what other floating objects you can get to attract or repel. Leave a comment and let me know what you find. And if you see any cool physics in everyday life I should check out in a future video, let me know. Stay curious.
Similar things you will see even when dry leaves falling on ponds and liquid containers. All these dry leaves come together, cluster and separate out, and many kind of new things happens. Now let us look at a dripping faucet. Like your kitchen tap, if you open it and try to observe the high-speed photography, it won't be a continuous stream. At certain locations it will be pinches of droplets, tiny droplets, wobbling, oscillations, many kind of things happens. What are the principles really govern those kind of dynamics? Now let us look at a droplet falling on a liquid surface. It bounces, does repeated oscillations, gradually changes its size, and finally merges with the liquid surface. Instead of straight away going down into that liquid surface, completely merge, it behaves in a different way. These days people try to explain the typical quantum mechanics where we try to say that it has both wavy nature, particle nature. People try to explain through this phenomena which they call pilot wave theory. So if you are looking from top view, at this simultaneously you will see both the particle nature like a drop and the waves which are coming out of it. If you are stick only towards that liquid membrane, it behaves more like wavy nature. If you really see only from the frontal view, particle is going up and down. So using this kind of basic information, people try to come up with how a light really behaves both particle and wave nature. Now let us look at a droplet falling on a heated sand. For example, like if it is raining on a hot day for agricultural purpose, how this sand will be eroded, that will be scattered out, and how this droplet really burrows down, finally what depth it really goes, what kind of craters it does, how this porosity really constructed inside that, how these granular ejections comes out of that structure. So that kind of complicated science usually involves with these fluid mechanics principles. Let us look at another surface tension effect. So you have two metal rings and a soap film, you are trying to pull it. When you are pulling, instead of making cylindrical stretch membrane, it does a kind of crazy shape which we call catenoid kind of thing, and suddenly there will be a singularity developed and that completely separates out. Now let us look at the height. It does a kind of low point
sugar, oh honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you, honey, oh sugar, sugar, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you. I just can't believe the loveliness of loving you. I just can't believe it's true. I just can't believe the wonder of this feeling too. I just can't believe it's true. Ah, sugar. Oh, honey, honey. You are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you. Oh, honey.
always say why such kind of behavior happens. Now let us look at, as a summary, life of a fluid dynamicist. In daily life, what we do. Perhaps aquatics are best example for fluid mechanics. Making coffee, mixing them, turbulent mixing. These are the keywords what we will learn in our something like low Reynolds number flow, rotational flow, non-linear flow, aeration, dripping of faucets, which we call relativity precipitation, splashes what happens, how these droplets maintain their shape, dirt, sea surface dynamics, stepping of stones, winding stones in the flow. You have multiple how boiling surface. Some of the things we may not learn in our course, but it's a beginner's course where we will introduce different terminology and which you are already familiar with. What is rotational flow? The idea of the droplet flows on hot surface. The fire burning is also possible. So, before closing this session, let us know few important names in fluid dynamics. It's already started in 16th, 17th century, the famous Bernoullis, Euler, and around 17th century Navier-Stokes are the key persons who have constructed this continuum hypothesis. Based on that, try to really talk about fluid dynamics issues. Bernard, Horace Lamb, these are the famous personalities who have worked out several problems in fluid mechanics. The three guys, Kelvin, Lord Kelvin, Rayleigh, Subramanian Chandrasekhar, Sommerfeld, these are the all-rounders who worked on different fields and contributed to science, especially to fluid mechanics. So the Arnold Sommerfeld effect in quantum mechanics and many things, he maintained a famous school where he has trained nearly 10 to 15 Nobel laureates. There are other personalities like Prandtl. So usually fluid dynamics community consider Prandtl is the leading figure, before Prandtl, after Prandtl. That's the way usually we address fluid mechanics. And his famous student Karman, Taylor the experimentalist, Lippmann who worked enormously on gas dynamics, high-speed aerodynamics, Batchelor who touched almost all the fields of fluid mechanics, Andreas Akrovos who worked on low Reynolds number flows, Andrea Prosperity who worked on multi-phase flow systems like bubbles, droplets, and many varieties, and Daniel Joseph, he is another important figure. Till the age of 40 years, he was a sociologist, more like talking about human things and these issues. At the age of 40 years, he enrolled for engineering and become one of the stalwarts in fluid mechanics. He lived up to 88 years, and within 44 years of time framework, he did a very great job in terms of understanding non-Newtonian fluids. There are few Indians also there in fluid mechanics community, like Satish Dhawan, who was leading figure at one point of time at ISRO. He was a professor at IIC also. Rodhan Narasimha, another living legend. Kalam, who was constructed single-handedly different kind of missiles, and he was an aerodynamicist. K.R. Srinivasan, who works on turbulent fields. And there is a Bangla scientist also, Fazal Hussain. He is another leading figure of fluid mechanics. Well, still there is some space available for you to scribe your name. As long as you learn, having perseverance for next 50 to maybe more than that years. So I just want to conclude today's lecture by Har Nahi Manunga, Raad Nahi Tanunga by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So as long as you put effort and so on, it goes very good. Not just for course, but if someone would like to really live in science, take it as their career, is natural that is everyday's process like learning. So what they did was standing on the shoulders of giants. So all these business started by Newton. These guys try to overlook on him, construct furthermore things. Like Newton, Leibniz, Gauss, all these guys have developed calculus, dynamics in a beautiful framework, and based on that these guys added little by little and try to really look at what's going on. To come back to our course, we require a little bit about vectors, tensors, calculus, algebra, ODEs, PDEs. Little bit we will learn and try to see how to work out these fluid mechanics. I'm sorry. The most important point is, it's not about maths, but it's about science. Can we logically deduce the things and connect the dots? And all these fluid mechanics based on continuum hypothesis. That is the second part of the lecture which we will cover. Thank you.